We as the affirmative in today's debate would fight for freedom on the internet. For the freedom of people to be able to access information on the internet, and for the freedom for people to be able to express themselves freely in the internet. Because that's what's the problem in the status quo in today's world. There are far too many countries in this world that censor people talking on the internet, that censor people getting information on the internet. So we will show you the need of the people in those countries. We will show you how this policy fulfills those needs, and we will show you how this policy is legitimate because of that. So, first of all, we will speak about 11 countries. The countries that are on the world's Reporters Without Borders Internet Enemies list. Those are Bahrain, Belarus, Burma, China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. And I encourage the negative team to ask me this during crossings. Why the internet as the medium? Because it's not biased. It's the most free of all. Because in those countries, the traditional media are so biased, there's only one national television or something similar. It's controlled by the government. What the internet we give is free, and they can post everything they want and access everything they want out there. And the internet is the largest thing to communicate on. Like 2.5 billion people access the internet, and 70% of them use it daily. So people can be heard through the internet by everyone that wants to hear them. So we will do actually, as I stated, two things in divisibility. First, show you how this policy provides human rights to people and how it's beneficial for them. And second of all, I will explain to you how this is a legitimate foreign policy. So first of all, I will speak about the freedom of expression. So whether it's information that is censored to protect the regime, the culture, the government, or eliminate political opponents, it's actually limiting one of the basic human rights, the right of expression. So the freedom of expression is one of the core pillars of democracy. In countries where extreme internet censorship is applied, like Bahrain, people cannot voice political concern over the current ruler. There is no political opposition in those countries. And why is this important? Because when we have a political opposition, there's someone to criticize the government and someone to question the government's decisions. And we have no political opposition, no one questions the government, and the government actually does whatever it wants. So the people in those countries are afraid of the government, and the government is not afraid of these people because the people cannot say anything that goes against the government and maybe the regime. And also, we're creating a critical mass of people that actually criticize someone, criticize a decision, or maybe approve a decision, whatever. People can express themselves now in their measure. And the difference in those countries, in the countries I'm speaking about, and the liberal democratic countries like Ireland, or the ones we live in, is that in the liberal democratic countries, you can state your concerns. You have institutions through which you can do this. You can express your concerns publicly. You can debate. You can do anything you want in order to, not force, but tell someone about your opinion. And in those countries, you cannot do that. You cannot punish the government in any way. So, in also democratic countries, you can vote against the regime. Something you cannot do in those countries. And with this, we create a political opposition, which is good for any democracy out there. Second thing, freedom of choice and the right of development. People in those countries have a lack of information. They do not have the information we have in liberal democratic countries. They have less information to choose from. The spectrum of information they have is limited. It's selected information that is provided by a certain government to a certain media that's controlled by the government. So the government only gives information that suits the government, and I'll explain this more later on. So this means if you have fewer information means fewer choices. You have few choices to pick from. So if you've only tried green tea in your entire life, of course green tea would be the best tea for you. And it's the best for me because I drink it every time. But if you try peach tea or apple tea or any other tea, you might like apple tea more. You might like it, and you should be able to express that you like apple tea more than green tea. Something which is not the case in those countries. And another thing, on a whole other level, in those oppressed countries, governments feed the people information the governments wants them to hear, and only those information. So the governments frame their people, and the choices that people make are not truly theirs, because they are framed in a certain shape by that certain government, and you do not have the choice to think otherwise. And the last point I will make in this debate is why should this be a foreign policy, and why this policy is legitimate. So first of all, when is a country sovereign? When it protects the human rights of people. When it's a legitimate government that's ruling over a certain territory, and the people there and the human rights over there are respected. And this is supported by the preamble of the United Nations, that governments have a moral obligation, signatories to the United Declaration of Human Rights have a moral obligation to protect human rights everywhere around UN jurisdiction, which means those countries too. So governments around the world, liberal governments around the world, have the obligation to protect the human rights there. And the right of expression and the right of development are human rights, ladies and gentlemen. So, and also one more thing, they have a moral obligation because they have been protecting human rights all throughout history. They have sometimes used military force with the excuse that we want to defend human rights. And with this non-invasive policy, we give human rights to those people. Second point, people need the support of other countries. They cannot do it by themselves. First of all, because they're framed by the government, they do not have the resources to do this, they do not have the education to do this, and even if they try to, from the inside, they will probably find themselves hung on a public square somewhere out there. And the people from the international community have the chance to help them. And last point, it's already being done on a foreign policy level. The UK funds more than $5 million, or 5 million UK pounds per year for this foreign policy. And the US in 2011, Hillary Clinton stated that she wants to fight internet repression in all countries, and she committed $25 million for this measure. And the world accepted it and applauded it. So the international community actually applauds this measure. Finally, we're not saying that every country in the world will do this. We're not saying that every country in the world will be free after we implement this measure. We're saying that this policy, as a policy from one country to one country that we stated, is a legitimate foreign policy tool. Thank you.
Sir, what is the proposition seeking by your model?
I don't get your question.
What is your goal?
Our goal is to provide human rights to those people there.
So you want to protect people?
We want to provide human rights.
What exactly? What exact human
The
rights?
right of expression, the right to access to information, the right to development.
Okay, you're talking about that you're protecting people.
Actually, that's protect human rights. Provide human rights because they don't have them right now at all.
Okay, thank you. You said that people are afraid of their government. How is that going to change under your policy?
We're not saying it's going to change. We're saying that we have a chance to contribute to the democracy there. We're saying that we give the people the chance to express themselves against the government.
How is that going to
internet.
change? How is that going to change against the fact that people are afraid of their government? People are afraid to protest. People are afraid of change in their country.
If we give them anonymous access to the internet, that they can post and chat and do everything they want online, maybe against the government, maybe for it, maybe do anything at all on the internet, they will not be as afraid from the government, because right now they do not have the freedom of thought, as I explained. I mean, because they are framed by the government, they do not have the freedom to express themselves and communicate themselves on certain topics.
So you again also state that people are afraid to gather in squares because they're hunted by the government.
Yes, but internet, cyberspace gives you the opportunity to gather online.
So your goal is just to provide people a comment on Facebook?
No, we're giving the people the right to access the information. We're giving the people the chance to organize, to motivate themselves, maybe go against the regime. Finally, we're not saying that will happen. Maybe it will happen. Maybe they will lose their fear. We give them the rights they deserve according to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights.
Under your policy, what do you suppose they're going to do with the information?
I do not get the question.
What do you believe they're going to do with that information that they learn freely?
They might learn that they like apple tea more than green tea.
Thank you. What makes a sovereign state sovereign?
It's having a legitimate government, first of all, protecting the human rights
Define
there.
legitimate government, please. Define legitimate government.
One that protects all the basic human rights, actually, that are protected in this declaration right here. And giving the opportunity to people to develop themselves into people, which those governments do not
Can you please define that last your sentence? How the government is legitimate when it allows people to progress? Can you define progress?
Here, you're a debater at the Idea Forum, and Lithuania gives you that opportunity. In those countries, people cannot do what they want to do, what they can do in liberal countries.
Okay, thank you very much.
adapting to an interesting paradigm? Don't worry about it, Scott. It takes a while. You know, the emotional state. No, it's well, that would be possible. Actually, I'm saying so far because there's always that possibility. When I first started out, it was like I was on like almost every time. I remember. A couple of different.
Ladies and gentlemen, both green tea and apple tea is nice. However, when these countries don't allow people to drink that apple tea, what we see is going to be happening to people who attempt to do it is they're going to be jailed. Essentially, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to be operating on is that it's not only impossible to reach the effects which they have not specifically told us that are going to come up, it is also going to backlash, and it's going to backlash to the people that we're trying to reach, and it's going to backlash to international relations as well, because this is a foreign policy, and no such invasive foreign policy has ever been tried with, for example, China, Saudi Arabia, or Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go through directly with their arguments and include those backlash arguments as are constructed within the refutation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on the first argument that it provides human rights, essentially, ladies and gentlemen, we want to, that's exactly why we asked the proposition, what is their goal today? Because we expected them to tell us that the situation is going to change. However, they themselves said that you're going to be hung if you are accessing these, you have a possibility to be hung if you're accessing this information. You have a possibility to be hung in North Korea or China if you're actively protesting. So we see that they're effectively, well, not really effectively, providing these human rights to people, and we're going to contest that as well. And they're going to get them killed. We see it's not going to work for several reasons. It's not going to work because very few people in several countries that they have specified have internet access, for example, North Korea and Cuba. Most people who have internet access in those countries is a nomenclature that is providing the government propaganda to say that the United States is an invasive country and it's doing something wrong, for the people to hate them even more. The second reason why it's not going to work is because these countries are simply too oppressive. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, they already share blocking information between each other. They're providing deterrence for the people to not use that. Ladies and gentlemen, China has about 30,000 people dubbed the Internet Police, who are actively seeking out people who are using proxy servers right now and jailing them for whatever time they need. Same goes to Syria. They have very loose laws in terms of the internet, so they can effectively jail people for whatever time they want. So ladies and gentlemen, we see that if you're going to increase the number of people, we see that the number of people is not going to increase because they're going to be afraid, something that they've specified themselves in their speech. But even if it were to increase, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have more people who are not able to manifest their new freedoms. They're not able to express them in the public because they're not allowed to protest in the public of China. We're also going to see that there's going to be backlash for people. How is that going to occur? Ladies and gentlemen, if the US is going to actively circumvent China's, for example, internet censorship, we see that the people are going to be the ones that suffer. Essentially, ladies and gentlemen, the very people they're trying to save are going to be harmed even more. We see an analogy right now. When guns are provided in Syria to aid the people of Syria, we see that the violence is ever so escalating because more people are using those weapons and more people are getting killed. We see another reason, ladies and gentlemen, is that simply these countries are going to harshen the laws that are in place to prevent people from accessing those free sites, because they'll have to attempt to somehow save the regime. So essentially we see that the punishments for people who are using the internet right now under their policy are going to be harsher, more people are going to be jailed, and more people are going to suffer. And that is going to be the responsibility of the United States and the European Union, that they're effectively giving them the tool to put themselves at danger, as well as not letting them use their rights to effectively change the situation. Because you're not changing any laws in China, you're not changing any laws that prevent you to amass in squares, ladies and gentlemen, in North Korea or Cuba. You're not changing anything, you're only putting them at risk. Ladies and gentlemen, the second argument is that it's an effective foreign policy. So essentially they argued that these countries are not sovereign because they're not legitimate, because they don't provide human rights. But then again, they conceded in the cross-examination that a government is also legitimate when it provides progress. So we would like to ask you how China's government isn't legitimate if the understanding of legitimacy in these countries differs so much from the Western-centric understanding of legitimacy. Because we see that a lot of people are satisfied with the situation in China, and they have agreed to give up their rights to improve their economic situation, because otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, if the government were not to impose these restrictions, then the people would be suffering because there would be no longer stability, there would be no economic progress. But ladies and gentlemen, we believe that even if this isn't true, and we see that sovereignty is irrelevant in this case, because what we see is that sovereignty, ladies and gentlemen, when you violate somebody's sovereignty, when they see that they are sovereign, for example, China sees itself as sovereign, we see that there are very huge potential harms to the countries that are enacting this law, which would be, under your case, the United States or the European Union. Why is that so? First of all, this is a very invasive policy in terms of several countries. For example, China is the main trading partner of the United States. Saudi Arabia is the biggest trading partner of the United States in the region, so essentially, as well as Russia within the region. So we see that it's going to harm international relations. That has happened in 1974 when the United States took a stance on supporting Israel, and the Arabs shut down all supply of oil. And they used this leverage effectively because the United States shifted their position. The same happened with the Magnitsky Act, when a dissident in Russia was praised by the US Parliament. The Russians effectively, a month after, and that was a year ago, banned the right for US citizens to adopt Russian children, ladies and gentlemen. However, we see that this is even more detrimental to international relations because this has never been tried to such an extent. We have never violated their sovereignty to such an extent. And they're going to use all the leverage they have, which is trading agreements, to leverage their position out of this policy. So we essentially see that there are not that many benefits, or at least specified within their case, but we see that there are too many backlashes and drawbacks that we can't allow this policy to go on. Thank you.
And these were just delightful, and I shouldn't think of them so much, but they're pulled them out. Yeah. And these are, these are the ones that, yeah.
Are you ready for classic? Have you heard about New Wave?
New waves in the style of music?
No, New Wave is in the proxy that 300 million Chinese people use to access Facebook, Twitter, and so on.
No, I have not. Please tell me more about it.
Well, that's the basic of it. There's a proxy that Chinese people developed. 300 million people are using it.
And I bet people are being punished for using that proxy when the government finds out, right?
Well, if 300 million people are using it, which is effectively 1/3 of the Chinese policy, then doesn't this mean that their situation is so bad and they want to help?
First of all, I don't know where you're getting the numbers, because our numbers say that about 3 million people are using proxies to evade censorship. However, we see that the more people using this, and when the United States specifies that we're using this foreign policy to fight your unlawful ways of governing a country, we see that the countries are going to backlash even more. They're going to prosecute people more, persecute people.
Do the Chinese people know about the internet police?
Probably. I don't know.
So they know.
I don't know. You would have to ask one of them.
So how did you find out?
How did you find out? I Googled it.
So you found it out through the internet, right?
Yes.
So can they find it out through the internet?
Yes, and then be jailed.
Tell me, in your opinion, in the negative team's opinion, does progress mean money?
Yes.
Tell me,
Pretty fine.
how did Arab Spring happen?
How did Arab Spring happen? One person in Tunisia self-immolated himself, and then because people were very dissatisfied with the governments, they have revolted against them.
Okay, and the government there was oppressive, right?
Yeah, somewhat.
So these people were aware that there would be a huge backlash against them.
Well, probably not. They would not. They definitely, the majority of Syrians
Also,
that are
when
fighting the government have not figured out or have not anticipated that the 100,000 people in 2 years would have been killed.
So when they started protesting, they started protesting because they saw, it's a green day, let's go protest? Why did they start
I don't know. It might have not been sunny. Although we don't necessarily see that the effects transfer as you tell us that they do, because
So
we see
when
that
protesters come out to fight the regime, they don't know that something bad will happen.
Oh, they do.
So they do. So then why do they do it despite all this? Despite the potential murder.
Because there was a very clear possibility, especially since the United States provided a little bit more than internet censorship, circumvention, with something that they have not provided in the Arab Spring case. And secondly, we see that these governments are much less oppressive than the 11 countries that you have specified.
Do you want me to
within your
repeat
speech.
the 11 countries?
Yes, you mumbled them really fast.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought you had them.
Well,
Well, could be
Here we
going on.
Bahrain, Belarus, Burma, China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam.
Thank you.
Let's treat this as a question. Are you okay? Are you fine? How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. Ja. 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 Oh, okay.
Сделал сагиси, подождем, если его интервью.
Wait.
Too many boring professors. So did you go practice in Macedonia? No, I thought of it. That's what I was thinking.
Si quieres, aquí se Tikas iš to, tai žmonės vis tiek negauna teisų. Trečdalis Kinijos naudoja. Jeigu tik gyvūnuose, tai reiškia, kad kitą kartą, kai įsijungsiu BBC, turėtų būti protestas. Man reikia pasakyti, aš iš per daug žuvies pavalgiau, tai aš
See, I live around one track.
Bet mes sakom, kad jeigu neturėtų sakyti. Jo, tiesiog, kad mes sakom, kad, ta prasme, demokratinius election, mes sakom, kad mūsų aplinkai jokia kitokia negali būti. Nes dabar jau bet net jeigu tai mes jie mano, kad jie yra suaugę. Jeigu mes šitą darysime, jie šiknas ir prezervatyvą ne.
So what we have in this debate is a team on the negative side that progress equals with money, and what we have on the other side as affirmatives is a team that progress equals human rights established and provided. So this is what we stand in this debate. We are saying this is a justified policy. Why? Because it provides human rights. And everything that if this policy provides the human rights, we cannot predict the choice of the people. We cannot predict whether Egyptians or whoever from these countries will choose to go against the government or to choose not to go against the government. Which is my first topic of saying that the choice. They're saying that, you know, China has 30,000 people that are like internet police, and they're scouting all around the internet, searching people to be jailed and so on and so forth. Let's be honest, China uses internet. You can see Chinese blogs, you can see Chinese songs and so on and so forth. So it's not that they block it at all. And we don't see many people in jail because of this. We don't see people in millions in jail because of this. And more with this, if people knew, and yes, they probably know about internet police, And yet if they chose to go to the internet, if they chose to go to that proxy, that means that they're in deep trouble, and if they dislike the system they want, and that's why they're ready to take the punishment just to express themselves, just to say what they have to say. And this is what is important for us, to give the people a choice, because they hadn't had one till so far. We are giving them a choice. Moving on, they say more people will not be able to express their opinions. We say they will be able to express their opinions. Because while expressing your opinions is not the only thing that matters. It also matters the reaction you get from the people that see those opinions. And on the internet, many people see these opinions. And that's what actually Arab Spring is about. The empowerment of the people who protested on the street came from the support, the huge support they got from the international community. From individuals like me, like him, like you, dear judges. This is why the reaction is very important for you to get, because it gives you the empowerment. And moreover to this, they say punishments will be harsher, everything will be harsher, and so on and so forth. This is if the people choose. On the point of choice, if you choose to take a gun in your head, but yet express yourself before that, it means that you dislike the system you lived before. It means that you are so oppressed that you're willing to take the punishment, whatever it is, that you need to take the punishment in order to establish your rights. That says something, dear negatives. Because if people choose to do this, and we see that in the Arabian Spring they chose to do this, they're in deep trouble. And this is why it's important for us, to give the people a choice, once again. Now, moving on to the second point, about the team that progress means money. They say, well, China is doing fine, they have all the money in the world, they're the best economy, one of the best economies to be honest, and it's fine for them, they have progress, because legitimacy by us was, if the government provides progress for its people, then it's a legitimate government. What they didn't understand is that we acknowledge, and the United Nations acknowledge progress as providing human rights, not providing money. Because, let me ask you a question, would you rather live in a middle-class family where you can see, where you can let your wife goes on the streets whatever she likes to be dressed and so on and so forth? Or would you like to live in a so-called wealthy regime where you cannot actually see the needs of your wife while she walks on the street? We choose rights. This is what we have pledged to do. And on the point of international relations, for the end of my speech, they're saying there's a very huge potential that it harms, and that there will be harms after your policy. I mean, yes, we acknowledge that there will be some disabilities in the foreign policy, but any foreign policy, if you do a foreign policy as a country, you will certainly find another country that dislikes that foreign policy. I mean, it's normal. That's how international relations actually go in the last, 100 years. And this is why we see that we should not ever put diplomacy in front of, or for international relations, in front of providing human rights. So, what is their resolution on this aside negative? They say they're in big trouble, they don't have rights, but it's very unfair for the diplomacy for us to provide them human rights, so let's just don't provide them. We say as affirmatives, it's fair enough. It's justified enough for us to provide them with a choice. The choice that they will make. If they make the choice to go against the government, fair enough, they had a reason to do so. But if they had a choice not to go against the government, also fair enough, they like it over there. What's important, what we change in this debate, is that right now, these countries do not have a choice. By our policy, yes, they do have a choice. And they'll be able to choose between the government and something else. The thing that they don't have right now. That's why I beg you to vote affirmative.
Alright, so who is the US primarily responsible for? Whose citizens?
For its citizens, but since it's a part of the United Nations, it's responsible for establishing human rights.
So that means it should intervene into every country that is doing very harsh things. For example, it should intervene to North Korea, whatever the consequences for the people, right?
Depends on what the kind of intervention it is.
Right. So military intervention can sometimes be justified, can sometimes not be justified, right?
It depends very much on the situation.
But yeah, all right. So if the
No,
situation,
yeah, I said
Alright.
it depends on the
so
situation.
if the situation then provides many harms to the people that you are trying to protect and the country that is enacting
Here's
the
the thing.
policy.
May I answer the question? The Iraqi people didn't have the choice to say, we want to be bombed, we don't want to be bombed. These people actually have the choice to say, yes, we want to go
Alright.
against the government,
Alright.
and we don't want to against the
Alright,
government.
so let's talk about these people, especially your New Wave thing. So, if allegedly 300 million people in China are right now using proxies to find out about the wonders and splendors of democracy, that means that effectively when I turn on the BBC tomorrow, I'm going to see protests in China, right?
It doesn't.
No, why not? Why are people not protesting in China?
Because they have a choice to make. Maybe they like it there, maybe they don't.
Oh, so it's not the army that is going to somehow sweep them off the
Look,
squares like in Tiananmen?
we never said that we're going to enforce, our goal is to make protests, or our goal is to cheat the government.
So
Our goal is
essentially-
to give the people the choice, which
So,
we
okay.
explain in our organization.
So
why
essentially
we do
you're going to give them the choice and gamble on the chance that they're going to change the situation by getting them killed by more harsher rules
Look,
that the country
we're
is
not
going to take.
gambling on anything. We're giving them a choice. If they think it's bad enough for them in that country, they will make a choice against the government.
So-
If they think it's okay, then they won't. This is our point. The important thing is providing them with a choice that right now they do not have.
Alright, so does the US articulate its position on China as saying as the Chinese government is legitimate? Does the United States says that China is illegitimate in some form?
I really don't know the position of the
No.
United States.
So they're not just saying that, well, you have some human rights issues, but you're legitimate because you're providing stability and economic progress for people. They're not saying that.
I don't know what they're saying, as I said.
You don't know what they're saying.
If you could tell me, I will please. Yeah.
They're saying exactly that. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I thought it was just me. I thought I was going to blow
I can actually see what I'm trying to write now. So people are sleeping. I thought it was just me. So I thought I pressed the second so back where it was to get me on screen. I'm thinking I'm old. That's what
Oh, no, you don't listen here.
Kodėl US sako, kad China yra legitimate country? Yra realūs tarptautiniai žmonės, tai turėjo bubble ant šito. Man tai kilo. Prašau, kažkas iš šito.
Press the reset button.
No, you didn't really care about
Bye. I don't think he's leaving, I think.
Is everyone ready? Yep. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the first app speaker said that the legitimacy of this foreign policy is such that it will empower people, that it will bring human rights to people, that essentially it will benefit people. And that's where we disagree, because we see that this policy will only harm the people through harms via international relations, through harms within the countries that are oppressive, and so on and so on. So dear ladies and gentlemen, what we say today is that the people that we want to help will not get the apple tea, and that's what we should care about. Them getting the apple tea, not merely knowing about it, and that's what they won't get. So dear ladies and gentlemen, I'll prove this in 2 points. First, I'll talk about human rights, how will they will not be brought to the people in the oppressive regimes in the selected 11. And then I'll talk about sovereignty and international relations and its impact on the people, because it's the people that are oppressed that we care about. So on the first, dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let's go back to what they said. In their first speech, and continuing on the second, they said that people in the oppressive regimes, in the selected 11 again, they are too afraid to use proxies, they are too afraid to access the internet, and so on and so on. We agree with that. They are afraid, that's why they don't sometimes use it. But what we say is that even if we, for example, provide them with certain proxies or whatever, they will still be afraid. Why? Because currently under the status quo, proxies still exist, and proxies are being cracked down. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Defense in China takes care of that no person on the internet criticizes the constitution or even clashes with the truth as defined by the government. So there are mechanisms in those 11 countries that they are talking about, how they take care of the descendants. And if, on one level, they're afraid and they won't use it, so that their policy they're proposing will not have any effect. But if, some people still choose to do it, the laws that are existent and that will not be altered because that's not their policy will still be in place and will only get harsher. Why? Because there will be an external agent messing with the domestic laws of these 11 countries, and that's not something any sovereign nation wants. So dear ladies and gentlemen, this policy either is of no effect or is of detrimental effect because it brings people to crime more. It encourages people to crime, and that's where their choice argument falls. When they said that people choose to obey because people realize revolutions don't happen easily and they choose to revolt. Dear ladies and gentlemen, what we say, that's true. However, there is no country, no foreign country that should be responsible for urging people to crime, for urging people to dissent their laws and then dying because that's their inevitable doom, sadly. And to prove that, there are, according to them, 1/3 of Chinese people already commit crimes and use proxies, and there's no revolt to that because they're either too ineffective and fined or crimed or hung in public squares, as they themselves said. So dear ladies and gentlemen, their policy is either of no effect or it's detrimental to the people within those countries. On the second issue, on the international aspect of this policy, dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, they made this huge issue that we treat progress merely as money. And we don't necessarily do that, but I'll still defend this. Dear ladies and gentlemen, what we want to say today, that the Saudi women are now allowed to go to taxis, and there never was law against that, because they are now a little bit more empowered to use their own money because they're not afraid of the customs of the society. So because of the economy rising, because of progress with money, they get human rights. In China, they now get healthcare, they get housing, human rights, essential human rights necessary to protect the right to life, because China has progressed in economic and monetary terms, and thus they empower the people to some extent. Maybe in 20 years we'll see even more changes, but that's what is needed. Cuba, for example, has liberalized its policies right now because of dire economic situations and fearing backlash. And the Arab Spring, their so beloved Arab Spring, also happened mostly because the governments failed to provide what was needed for the people to subsist and to have their lives protected in the first place. And And dear ladies and gentlemen, yes, we do believe that money is crucial to survival, and survival comes first usually than posting comments on funny pictures of cats. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the second thing, what we think that they misinterpreted is that we don't defend diplomacy merely as a play between two politicians. We see diplomacy as having a profound effect on people. We already given you examples of the Magnitsky Act, of the oil embargo, and those created huge, massive, Magnitsky not so much, but the oil embargo created massive harms to people, and we don't think diplomacy is just a game of politicians. It has effects on people, and if China, in backlash to the United States, cuts their trade supplies, we'll have people suffering in both China and rural China, dying from not subsisting, and in the United States, and we don't want to risk that. And dear ladies and gentlemen, even though the United Nations recognize that human rights is a right, dear ladies and gentlemen, they also say that they would throw out, a country that does not abide to these rules. Yes, Syria is there, China is there, and so on and so on. So we don't take politicians' words for granted. And for these two reasons, because we care for the people, and the real effect on the people will not be good, please oppose.
Whenever you're ready. So is there a difference between a proxy provided by the US government and a proxy provided by a gamer in his mom's basement?
Well, I don't think a gamer necessarily provides a proxy, but then I don't think, in effect, to the Chinese government that has a ministry to fight proxies, there is an actual difference.
Are you saying that the proxies from the US government wouldn't be better than the proxies from regular gamers in their mom's
I am not sure, but I don't think it will be much of trouble to the biggest enemies of the internet there is today. They will find ways to crash them down. That's what we firmly believe.
Ways. That's your orientation. Thank you. Do you agree that with our policy, we actually really give the people a choice?
No, we don't, because they cannot.
How do we give them a choice? Please
because even if, in some way, they can access the internet, which we doubt, they will not be able to do anything with that, because they will be jailed for using that, and if they
try to do something, knowing that they will go to prison, isn't that a choice?
It is a choice which...
Thank you very much. That's the choice we're looking for. Is having a choice bad?
Well, if the choice leads to harms to the people, we cannot take the responsibility for it.
On a principle level, is having a choice bad?
If I give you a joint of marijuana, I'll give you a choice to smoke it or not, but it's not something I can take upon myself as a responsibility.
It's my choice. If I want to take the joint, I will take the joint.
But it's not how governments work.
Answer this question. On a principle level, is having a choice a bad thing?
I cannot answer this question on a purely theoretical level because we actually play with human lives here, and you play with human rights here, and you don't.
So the right of choice that the UN Declaration of Human Rights protects is not a good thing.
No, it is a good thing, but you won't defend human rights.
We have proven that we will defend human rights, and that will be shown by our third speaker again. Didn't the Arab Spring happen kind of on Twitter?
No, it happened in the streets after
Where did it start?
In the streets of Tunisia, I believe, when they...
Where was it empowered?
It was empowered.
How did it get international support from all countries, liberal countries around the world?
Okay,
please.
so...
How did the people find out about what was happening in Tunisia and Libya?
First step, economic disparity. Then
did they post funny pictures, funny comments of pictures with cats?
No. Well, it's something the basis for the revolt was something to go to with economics, not with internet.
Economics, but they did have a reason to go against the regime.
What
didn't they?
You would want to prove is that they read
didn't
online
they
that there's
have
a
a reason
thing as
to go
democracy.
against the regime?
Sir.
Didn't they have a reason
No,
to go against
I can answer this. Your model would apply if they read online that there is a democracy and then wanted that, and that's why revolted. They had deep-seated reasons for a revolt.
Deep-seated reasons, and they chose to revolt and to die
those
because
were
of
economic, and those could be solved by progress.
Could be solved by any measure, can be. But it's many measures, any measure down doesn't.
Sir,
they chose to die. Didn't they chose to die and protest?
Please don't yell at me first.
Didn't they choose to die and
the
protest?
Libyan people did not revolt because they did not have access to the internet. They revolted because they were killed in the streets and they did not have anything to subsist on.
That's my point. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you for a few seconds of appreciation about the fact that after hundreds of years of toil and not being empowered, women in Saudi Arabia can now enter cabs. Thank you. Thank you for all this choice, whether you want to enter a cab or not in Saudi Arabia. But what the affirmative team today says that 100 years for entering cabs is simply not enough. That these people need to have access to the human rights that they want to and need to make a choice on their own whether they want the green tea, the situation that they already have, or the apple tea, the situation that they have to fight for, but we believe they deserve. Now, from this come my 3 clash points. The war of the apple tea, how $1 million is worth of worth of progress, and how countries are like siblings. Now, on the first point, the negative team has stated that the choice argument fails because the laws will get harsher. Because the laws, after the people make the choice to actually fight for their own human rights, will get harsher. The affirmative team says, yes, okay, the laws will get harsher. But the laws will get harsher because these people choose to say that the situation that they have today is not okay. That they want to enter cabs, they want to enter buses, they want to enter planes on their own and for it to be okay. Now what affirmative team has been trying throughout this debate is to show you that we are going to give these people a glimpse into the other way. A glimpse into human rights, a glimpse into having the freedom of expression, a glimpse into having this choice. And when we give them this internet, when we give them this information about the fact that there is another system, we're giving them the choice, if they want to go out on the streets. And if they don't want to, if they're satisfied, to stay at home. Now, negation has claimed that choice is generally good. They have not opposed this. And what we're saying is that not only these people know that there is another way and be able to fight for this other way, but also that they will know that there are other people internationally who support them, which, as in Arab Springs, will provide empowerment. Empowerment for them to continue on with the freedom of expression that they will have on the internet, and empowerment for them to make bigger and bolder choices if they want to. If they think it's worth getting hanged, then we say that they deserve the choice. And and they will choose to be hanged if they want to change something in their lives and improve them. Now on the second point, $1 million worth of progress. What negative team has been telling us is that yes, money equals progress. Money equals progress in a sense that they can get in a cab on their own. Ladies and gentlemen, affirmative has shown you 2 levels of progress that we believe are key to a person. First of all, the political progress of the country, and second of all, the personal progress. The first one being how the political progress of a country comes from an opposition. Because when you have someone saying what is wrong with the government and what the government should be improving in their policies in terms of their position, the government will actually see that the people are not satisfied. And yes, they might make the laws harsher, but if the people choose to fight hard enough and choose to improve their lives, then the opposition will lead to political development in favor of the people. And secondly, on a more individual level, we believe that you need human rights in order to progress. You need to be able to have information. You need to know that there is apple tea, that there is green tea, that there is everything going on out there, and you need to be able to make your own choice. We say that progress, and we say that personal progress comes from these basic human rights and everything that you choose to become using these basic human rights and information. And on the last point, how countries are like siblings. Well, they declare to help each other, they need each other, but still they constantly fight. Ladies and gentlemen, they have provided us with many cases where international relations are very, very bad. But these happen all the time. Yet the countries still make agreements like United Nations, which say they declare that they will protect each other's people. They will try to supplement everyone out there in the UN with human rights. And this is why they have the obligation. Because the people under these 11 governments need the help, need this freedom of expression, and need this freedom of choice. And someone has to provide them. And who better than your fellow sibling with which you argue, but has obliged to help you. Yes, because these people deserve a choice, and because these people, if they want to fight, they will fight, and because we need to provide them with something, some sort of information that they will be able to make a choice whether to fight on or not, I beg you to vote affirmative.
How much time do I have? 3 minutes?
I was just curious. I was afraid I might have missed something. Sorry, I was
One is smaller.
Ladies and gentlemen, Team Macedonia supports not an apple tea, but a poison apple for these people. Team Macedonia supports a choice that leads nothing just to fines, jail, and death. And we believe that this choice is a distorted choice that we on Team Lithuania will never support. And we believe that this debate comes down to two flashpoints. Is it effective policy, and is it a legitimate one? Going on the first flashpoint, talking about is it an effective choice? Because first of all, we never heard throughout their whole case what is their goal. Because the only goal that they established was the information. They want people to access information, but they never established what people are going to do with that information. Because we believe establishing that they will have a choice is not enough in this situation. Because we believe that the consequences of this choice already are just too big. Because also what we heard was a very interesting fact that 1/3, according to the proposition, of Chinese people already use internet access. Already know. So first of all, we see a lot of logical fallacies in this point. Because first of all, we see that already people then, according to them, know the information that they're seeking. People that already know what democracy is. People already that should already have actually have made some changes. Because what we actually never heard, why is not the status quo, according to them, doing any change if the change that they're actually supporting is that already that happening? Also, what we actually see, that people are actually not actually raging against the regime because they're feared. And we don't see anything changing under their policy because nothing is going to change, ladies and gentlemen. Laws are not going to change. People are still going to be hunted. People are still going to be jailed. People are still going to be actually criminalized because of their internet access. We don't see anything changing on that too. Also, what we see, because people are going to fear the regime, I just claimed, people are not going to access. And we see this ineffective, again, for the policy that they actually presented. But even if we assume that more people will access internet, what we will get is more oppressed regime for the people. And if their policy actually is to protect the people, we don't see it happening. Because what the regime will do to protect itself, it's going to be having harsher laws, harsher police, harsher crimes for these people to do. Also, what we see that this choice is distorted because they already don't know. Also, what we see that they actually are putting people in danger just because of that choice. Because what we basically said that they can rebel and they cannot rebel. But what we actually will in every case scenario get is people putting in danger. And what is actually is a logical fallacy on the proposition's case. Because if they wanted to protect people, we see that's already backlashing themselves. Because what we actually put is putting them in danger. And what we actually talked a lot was UN, and we have to intervene, and we have to help people in every case scenario. We asked them a very simple question. Why then we are not intervening in Syria when people want it, but we actually don't do it for a very simple reason, ladies and gentlemen, because we see that the consequences of that action are just too big. We don't believe we can support it. And also the point about sovereignty, because they basically told us that China is not a sovereign state. First of all, we see a very West-centric mindset, because we actually have that U.S. themselves never established that China is actually not a sovereign state. Because why? We see there are direct harms to US itself. And I'm going to expand it a little bit later. But what we actually see that already is not the same, and the position about sovereignty already shifts, and we do not support just one mindset. Also, what we actually never understood was economic progress that we made from Luthuania. Because what we actually told us that economic change and economic progress actually leads to human rights. Because what we actually believe that it can help in the process, and what we see. But another point that we made was about Arab Spring. Ladies and men, there's a very simple logical fallacy. Because Arab Spring and Arab Spring countries, internet was accessible for more than 10 years, but no change whatsoever happened during those years, but just last week. So we never understood why internet was so important role in their case, and we never heard, and we probably will. And also what we see about international relationships, no response, first of all, because what we actually thought that the risks are just too big. When we see that Saudi Arabia has the leverage that it can use against, when we see other countries can actually will damage that, and when we have evidence in the past, so we don't believe that the US should harm its own citizens in the name of this illegitimate source. So ladies and gentlemen, we do not have any positive effects. The poison apple should not be given to people who are hungry. So ladies and gentlemen, we beg you to oppose.